Mr. Acting Speaker. My grievance today is in relation to our economy and the investments we make going forward. I want to preface the debate by starting off with a common element we see across the country at the moment, and that is the lack of jobs and opportunities for our young people. And I think that will be further compounded because this week there was a report in the newspaper. Mr. Jerry Gary of MRA made a very telling statement, and that statement reads that by 2040, all our existing and pipeline projects in mining will come to an end. Mr. Acting Speaker, that is 18 years from today. Most of us in this House will still be alive when this event kicks us in the face. Mining, oil and gas currently contributes 30% of Papua New Guinea's GDP. So of the 100 billion kina we talk about in this House, some 30 billion comes from oil and gas and mining. More significantly, 80% of our foreign exchange is earned by this sector. In 18 years' time, we can look forward to 80% of our foreign exchange earnings coming to a complete stop. That is the reality that faces our country. And I put to you, Mr. Acting Speaker, that it is now urgent that whilst we see a lot of investments from budget to budget, and whilst we see a projection that says that our economy is going to grow, we need to start working on the nuts and bolts. And I put to this House that this is not just a job for government, this is a job for the Parliament. We cannot wait anymore. We cannot procrastinate anymore. And I note briefly from the debate, from the response of the Minister for Trade in responding to the member for North Fly on the question of Octedi coming to an end in 10 years' time, and his very eloquent response in terms of what has to be done in Western Province. That alone foreshadows what needs to be done for the entire country. In the last 5 years I've been in this House, we have discussed at length, there have been many debates about diversifying our economy. I'm sad to submit that in the last 5 years I have seen very little attempt. Whilst we have focused quite a bit on SME, we have yet to see a presentation on this floor as to the outcomes we have achieved from the significant investments placed in entities like the Bank of South Pacific in order to help grow some of these, well, this particularly important sector. But more than that, we know as we sit in this House that we have a massive liquidity problem. What does that mean? It means that our banking sector and the savings of Papua New Guineans in the super funds and other savings have reached very high levels. As a result, you will see that the demand for the purchase of treasury bills from the government is oversubscribed every time. Now that should tell us that there is too much money in the system, and that money is only chasing one investment. It's chasing government treasury bills. And that's not good enough. These investments need to be made in other parts of the economy. And we need to find a way through a very structured plan and a strategy going forward as to what we have to do from year to year to start to shift some of these revenues that are currently held with KPHL and other entities, the landowner funds, and of course the savings of our people in the super funds. We've got to figure out a mechanism to deploy those funds in other sectors of the economy. Particularly now, in light of COVID-19, with the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, we see a lack of capital investment in third world countries, particularly, well, in other words, developing countries. And we sit under that description of a developing country. We will find over the next 5 years that there will be less and less. While we talk about investments in Papua New Guinea, we will find that there are less and less foreigners interested in investing in our country. And that's not just because of law and order. It's because in their own countries, they are having difficulties with funding. And so a lot of these countries have come up with mechanisms and incentives for companies from those countries to move their money back into their own countries. And meanwhile, here in Papua New Guinea, we grapple with things like law and order. We have no written down plans. While we have made statements, I have yet to see an actual effort with people sitting down and figuring out how we start to shift our economy. And we need to see actual policies being put on this floor. We need to see measurements. If we are investing money in districts and provinces and roads and all these things, we need to see reports being placed in this house that tells us what is the return. We need to see a shift from all of these non-renewable resources, the money that they bring in. We need to see that shifting to the other sectors of the economy. And unless a bipartisan committee or some other mechanism is put together by eminent persons in our country to produce a document that not only this government, but every other government going up to 2040 can follow, then I put to this House that we are doing a disservice to our future generations. We are too busy with projects for today, building roads and bridges and all these things, and we are paying very little attention to an impending disaster that is going to befall our country in 18 years' time, Mr. Acting Speaker. And whilst I understand the pressing needs for us to fight over roads and bridges and little bits of money to fix houses and things like this in our districts, I think that we need to be paying attention to what is coming. And I think that is what our people elected us to do, not just to fix roads and bridges and dig drains, but to provide opportunities and to look at lasting opportunities for the next generation. And I submit that almost every government has failed in this regard. We have been making predictions for the last 10 years, perhaps going back further, that we know the revenue flows from our non-renewable resources, particularly oil, gas, and mining, are coming to an end. Yet I see us pay very little attention to that. Now that almost all of us are in government, I only see 4 members in the opposition. I put to this House that it is the responsibility of Parliament, Mr. Acting Speaker, that a minister be tasked, if not perhaps the Prime Minister himself, in terms of the Office of Planning, or even the Deputy Prime Minister. And we start to put the minds together to not just talk about it, but to write up a strategy that all provincial governments, all national departments, and all districts can contribute towards building this future for the next generation. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.